When the Night Comes Out presents Dibs. Carl Newman had just moved into his new apartment. Finally, he had a place in the city, not far from Wrigley Field, but not quite in the official borders of Wrigleyville. In short, it was perfect for him. He was on the lower floor of the 3-flat, just above the basement dweller and beneath a still empty apartment. It had taken years for him to get up the money to be able to afford a place in the city, especially a 2-bedroom, but here he was, and he planned to enjoy it. That morning, the forecast was calling for a very large snowstorm. This was not unusual for Chicago, but his first for that street. Outside, visible easily from his window, were the cars parked along the curb. He had a spot too, but he often parked other places because it seemed there was always a car parked in his designated spot. The same goddamn car. It was an old beater. The markings had been ripped off and the entire car appeared to be more rust than metal. The windows were foggy all the time, and it appeared to be slowly rotting away into the pavement. For some reason, the neighbors did not seem to mind, and he had never seen one of the infamous orange-colored stickers on the window indicating someone was going to take it away as an abandoned vehicle. One day, before the air started turning bitter cold and the leaves were changing, Carl asked his downstairs neighbor, who was also his landlord, "What's the deal with that car?" "That one?" Dale asked, hooking his thumb in the direction of it. "I don't know, but I think it just had dibs." "Dibs?" Carl asked, his face twisted up. "That only happens in the winter, right? You clear out a space and then get to, put a chair in it because you have dibs?" In Chicago, when the winter hit and you spent time shoveling or snowblowing your space in front of your home, it was common to essentially call dibs. What that meant in practicality was people put out lawn chairs or stolen road cones or chairs with boards across them. The city discouraged it, and snowplows often just plowed up the objects into a snow pile, but that never stopped people from doing it every year. In this case, however, the dibs seemed to involve an actual car. "Well, that car has always been there since I moved in," Dale replied. "Not sure who owns it, but, it's funny, most of the time I don't even notice it." "Well, it's in my spot," Carl protested rather weakly. "I mean, it's fine now, but when winter hits, I want that spot. I should have dibs, not this person." Dale just laughed. "Relax, I'm sure there will be a spot for you when the snow comes. Hell, you work from home most of the time anyway." Carl wasn't so sure, but he kind of let it go. Kind of. One night, during one of those weird Chicago fall days where the temperature suddenly rockets up to summer levels, he was outside with some of the other neighbors. They were talking, watching lightning flash in the distance as a cold front approached, and drinking beers. No one mentioned the car, and Carl felt doing so would just cause him to be labeled as the weird one, but he kept casting his eyes to the thing. It sat there silently, like a bulldog half asleep. It had to have been a Chrysler of some sort, maybe a GMC. He wished he knew cars more, but he had never found them to be anything more than utilitarian. Did it start? Did it run? Could he use it to get from one place to another? Great, then it was a fine automobile in his mind. So he had no clue. It was like a blank slate with no markings. When the group broke up, as the storm was almost upon them, Carl hung out a bit longer. Just as the first fat raindrops began to fall, he walked off the porch and over to the car. He studied the windows. No one inside. Nothing out of the ordinary other than the car itself. Rusted, but also with silver patches. There were license plates, but he had no one he could send them to find ownership. No tickets on the windows, nothing to indicate anyone even noticed the goddamn thing. "Dibs," he snorted. "Fuck you and your dibs. That's for fucking lawn chairs in the winter." Just then, as a loud rumble of thunder shook the ground, the engine of the car started. Carl jumped back at least 3 feet. Inside, the light turned on, but it was dim through the cloudy windows. "What the holy fuck?" he asked the car. He reached out and touched the hood. He felt the vibration of the engine through his fingers. Did this thing somehow have a remote start installed? Carl looked around, scanning the apartments as the rain started to fall in earnest. He was instantly soaked, and the rain fell so hard it was impossible to see if anyone was standing at one of the windows with a starter in his or her hands. "Fuck you!" he yelled. "There's no dibs." Overhead, the sky answered back angrily. He looked back at the car and leaned close to the window. Just then, a bolt of lightning flashed, and for a moment, he was certain there was someone or something behind the wheel. A skeleton. A skeleton wearing rotted clothes and whose grinning face had turned to look at him. Then it was gone, and the thunder roared. Carl backed away, shaking his head. Nope, I did not just see that. Too many beers. With that, he turned and ran back to his apartment. By the time he was inside, leaning against the door, dripping onto the floor and out of breath, he had almost convinced himself. Outside, the thunder roared. Carl did not approach the car again. Although he always saw it, glanced at it, he did not want to approach it. As the fall wore on and the warm weather even stretched into December, he began to think he'd never need to worry about parking spaces, snow, and dibs. Let the goddamn car stay where it was then. One day, while he was out for a brisk walk in the rapidly cooling air, he was walking back to his apartment with coffee in his hand. The sky was threatening, although the weather guessers were saying they would just get flurries. It was a reminder that the mild weather would not last. Whether it was in December or saving up for January, the snow would eventually come. As he was just walking past the car, he saw his neighbor Jane, who sometimes sat with the rest of them on the porch on mild nights. "Hey, Jane," he called and waved. Jane waved back. "Hey, Carl. I think winter might finally be about to arrive. What do you think?" He looked up at the clouds. There was something about winter clouds that just set them apart from summer. They appeared more like iron, sometimes silver. Mostly, they just seemed heavy, as if the snow they contained were too much. Carl wasn't sure if you could really smell snow, but the air did take on a different feel when a big storm approached in winter. "Yeah, think we might get some real snow," he replied. "Time to get out the shovels." They paused, both of them looking at the sky, and then Carl cast his eye down to the car. That goddamn car. "Do you know whose car that is?" he asked. "What car?" Carl pointed. "That one." Jane looked as if she hadn't noticed the thing before. "That one? Shit, that's been here forever. I heard it used to belong to a guy who was a real shitheel on this street. You know how people call dibs when they shovel snow? Supposedly this guy was a big believer in it, and when he put something in a spot, he'd defend it. I heard he went after a guy with a baseball bat once who tried to move the lawn chair he had put there. I also heard rumors the guy was into some weird shit." Carl cocked his head. "Weird shit?" Jane waved her arms. "Oh, people always pin all kinds of things on the cranky old neighbor. Rumors of rituals and being in league with Satan and all that crap. I never saw it. Funny though, I don't really remember his face. Or his name. Shit. Yeah, I thought he had died though." Jane put a hand to her chin as if thinking. "I can't remember when or how. Not sure why the car's still there." "I mean, that's supposed to be my spot," Carl answered. "At least that was what I was told, but everyone seems to act like they can't even see the thing. Can't we get it towed away? I've been parking in front of an old building 3 blocks away and walking. I don't want to get frostbite." "Hey, he had dibs," she said and laughed. "I mean, call the cops, see what they do. Not sure why they haven't put those red or orange stickers all over it, declaring it an abandoned car as it is." "Yeah, maybe." He had a sudden flash of the skeleton behind the wheel. That weird night with the thunderstorm where he had had too much to drink, which he had been sure was just a dream. He shuddered. "Well, I guess I better head inside," he said, suddenly having a powerful desire to get away from the car. "Take care of yourself, Jane." "You too." Carl headed back to his apartment and somehow forgot about the car. He did not call the cops, didn't call anyone. Instead, he sat on his sofa watching television while balancing his laptop on his legs and doing work. When the storm started to hit that afternoon, sending first pellets of ice against his window, and then huge blasts of wind that shook the same windows and their frames, he finally looked up from his work. "Damn it," he cursed as he put the laptop aside. "I forgot to call the cops." He stood at his window and saw the snow falling sideways. Across the street, another neighbor struggled against the wind and snow to get back to his apartment. Carl noted the man had a beard and it was covered in ice and snow. Then he cast his eyes down to the car. That goddamn car in his fucking spot. Tomorrow he'd have to walk 3 blocks to get to his car and try to shovel it out of the snow. The weather report on the television just behind him was already touting this as a blizzard. He'd end up looking like that guy across the street with the ice in his beard. Even if his office said no one had to come in tomorrow, he'd still have to trudge the 3 blocks across the ice through piles of snow just to get to his car. Reluctantly, Carl turned away from the window and looked at the clock. It was only 3. That meant he still had at least 2 more hours of work to deal with before he could even worry about the storm. He sat back down, took up his laptop, gazed at the weather report, which was getting more and more grim by the minute, and started working again. When it got to 5, he shut down quickly. Sure enough, his company was telling people to stay home tomorrow, too. Carl felt a bit better about that, but not about the fact he still had to take a shovel for 3 blocks, nearly break his neck walking across the icy sidewalks, just to get there and dig his damn car out. He stood at the window again. It was hard to see out there now. In fact, he could barely see the sidewalk, let alone the buildings across the street. However, he could see the car. It shone silvery now, perhaps from the streetlight above. It almost was as if it were mocking him. "You fucking car," he hissed at the window. "That's my goddamn spot. It should be me that has dibs there." It was tempting to head out there now and maybe take a baseball bat to the damn thing. It would still be in the way, but he would feel like he had done something. Tomorrow, his neighbors would all be out there shoveling out their spots. Of course, there were rules in the city on most streets about parking along the curb. Basically, you weren't supposed to do it on many of the busier streets. His street, however, was a side street and no such rule applied. Had this been a major route, the snowplows would need room to clear the roads, and this car would have been towed ages ago. Maybe. For some reason, people seemed to not even realize how long the car had been there. Carl wondered how long it had been there. Just because it looked like an old car didn't mean it had been sitting there since the 70s. People collected older cars all the time. The fact there seemed to be no markings on it was also weird. What make and model was this car? Something about it was familiar, as if he had seen it in his youth around the city, but he couldn't put a finger on it. He had also seen a license plate and thought he had memorized it and taken a picture of it, but he couldn't remember it, and when he called up the image, it was all blurry. Then there was his dream. He was sure it was a dream that night he thought he saw a skeleton behind the wheel. What the hell would make him dream of something like that? No one seemed to remember whose car it was, only remembered it was there when he pointed to it, and yet he could see it every time he looked out the window. However, when he turned his back to it, he did forget it. Was the reason he saw it every time just because this was his apartment and it was supposed to be his parking space? When he moved in and his landlord told him where his space was, he didn't remember noticing the car then. What the fuck was happening around here? He suddenly looked around his apartment. Had the guy who owned that car lived in this very apartment? Of course, there was nothing here to tell him yes or no. Plus, he had been here for months, and not a single creaky door or strange footstep, let alone the manifestation of a skeleton man. It nagged at him now. As the snow came down and down, as the ice got thicker, then buried in the white stuff, his anger grew. It was not fair. Fucking dibs for an old car that no one remembered? It didn't matter to him if it was some weird-ass supernatural thing. It wasn't fair to him. He was a good tenant and he paid his rent. He had gotten the right parking permit. Damn it, he should have that space. What the hell could he do about it, though? The car had to be locked, right? In his dream, yes, damn it, it was a dream, not real. The engine had just started on its own. It was too much to hope that would happen in real life. That meant he would have to get inside by smashing a window or something, and that was destruction of property. Plus, what did he do when he got in there? He was hardly a hot wire kind of guy. Would there be keys in the visor? It was too intense outside to go out there and mess around with the car now anyway, so he forced himself to sit down and watch television. As the night wore on, the wind got worse. The sounds outside the window grew more intense, and at one point, there was thunder and lightning. Try as he might, he could not go to sleep. Now every shadow seemed to show the skeleton man. He was sure the place wasn't haunted, but the car was haunting his mind. When he closed his eyes, he saw it there, the engine running, the lights on, and behind the wheel a shadow that turned into a skeleton the closer you got. He would snap awake and find he was still on the sofa and that the weather person was still on the air. Around 1 a.m, he got up and walked to the window again. The entire landscape was like something out of a sci-fi movie set on an ice planet. The streets were buried in 6 inches at least of snow. The cars were all indistinguishable lumps of white. The sidewalk did not exist. The car was still there. It was coated in ice and snow, but not buried as much as the other ones. In fact, the ground around it appeared not nearly as deep as elsewhere. What the hell did that mean? Was this a devil car, exuding heat whenever it needed to in order to keep the snow off? His mind felt like it was spinning out, and it being the middle of the night was not helping. One's imagination could run wild at 1 a.m. The snow was still intense, but the wind had died a bit. The wind had been blowing so hard it had reached blizzard territory, but now perhaps that stage had passed. He glared at the mystery car. He would be willing to bet money that people on the street who looked out their windows would see the snow, but not the car. No, the car was saved for him alone. Fucking dibs. Fucking bullshit is what it was. Enough was enough. Carl stepped away from the window, put on his boots, got his coat, added a scarf and a winter hat. Then he dug some ski gloves out of the closet and put those on too. Now armed for battle, he headed outside. His mission was simple: figure out a way to move that goddamn car. Was there really a reason for it? No, not really. His car was still blocks away and he was going to have to dig it out. However, when he was done with that task, he wanted the spot that had been given to him and to be able to park in front of his own goddamn house. He also realized he really didn't have anything on him he could use to smash the windows on the fucking car. Damn it. He cursed to himself under his breath. He walked over to the car. It sat there like a lump, the silver from the paint still shining through the glaze of ice and snow. The windows were still somehow foggy, as if ages of dirt had built up on the inside. "Get out of my spot!" He yelled at the car, feeling utterly stupid the moment he did. The last thing he needed was one of his neighbors opening their blinds to see who the hell was yelling, to just see him standing there yelling at a car. Carl walked up to the car and hit the driver's side window with his hand. In the cold, despite his gloves, it hurt like a son of a bitch. All he ended up doing was holding his hand and cursing. Another brilliant move. Madder than ever, he kicked the tire. It did nothing but hurt his toe, but this time he did not scream. Instead, he looked around on the ground. Fortunately, for reasons he could not fathom, the ground around the mystery car was not covered entirely in snow, just another mystery he did not give a shit about. There, a rock. Carl reached down and grabbed a rock just larger than the size of his closed fist. Snarling now, his face already feeling frozen and numb, he turned to face the car. He held the rock high in his right hand, ready to smash the window and deal with the consequences later. The engine burst into life. Carl jumped backwards, hit the curb with the back of his heels, and fell over into the thin layer of snow. He cursed yet again into the cold night. He looked up at the car, wondering what kind of trickery this was. It was just like his dream. It had to have been a dream. He got to his feet and peered into the window. This time, there was no shape there, no skeletal figure staring at him. There was a soft amber glow that he guessed was from a light on the dashboard. "What do you want?" he asked the car. "What do you want?" The car door opened. The sound made Carl jump, and when it swung wide, he jumped again. This time he remembered the curb and stepped back onto the lawn. "This can't be happening," he said to no one. Inside, it somehow looked warm. Perhaps that was just an illusion caused by the soft amber light, but he could hear music playing softly, coming from the speakers in the door. That meant the radio was on. "This is a bad idea," he whispered to himself. "This is a bad idea because this cannot be happening." He stepped toward the car door, then took another step. Nothing jumped out, and the door did not slam shut. Carl tried to pull back. It was like something had snagged his midsection and pulled him forward. Sweat broke out on his brow despite the intense cold as he fought the pull. What was influencing him? It could not be good, right? He managed to take one step backwards, but the pull was constant. He felt fear, but there was something else too. Sure, there was the burning curiosity of the situation, but it was more than that. He felt a powerful desire to get into the car. It made no sense, but nothing he told himself could stop his feet from moving. He sat down, pulling his legs inside. Then the door shut. Carl looked to his left and gasped, instinctively reaching for the door handle, only to find there was no door handle inside. Then the lock snapped tight. Carl began to panic, and he pounded at the window. That was when the radio came on full blast.
"You should have let it be. Instead, you had to push it."
The voice was like gravel. Without any rhyme or reason, Carl grabbed the steering wheel, perhaps thinking he could stomp on the gas and drive away. The moment he gripped it, an icy cold unlike anything he had felt before. In fact, he sat bolt upright in the seat, watching as frost appeared across the glass, the dashboard, all over the steering wheel, then his hands and up his wrist. "No," he whispered. "No."
"I have dibs on this spot. Forever. Did you hear me? Forever. You want dibs? Fine. You'll have it with me."
As the laughter of something horrible and demonic burbled out of the radio speakers, Carl watched his arms, elbows, and biceps freeze. The pain was intense, but then the nerve endings died as they froze to death as a cold unlike anything he had ever felt before sank into his skin. He had minutes, maybe seconds. He would become just another forgotten name. He knew that now. People would vaguely remember him sometimes, but no one would know where he had vanished. The car, wherever it was from, would continue to sit here, watching the street. Someday, another man or a woman would finally notice the car and peek inside. That time, 2 skeletons would look back at the person and send them screaming. As the cold washed over his shoulders, up his neck, and then over his head like an ice-cold blanket, he opened his mouth to scream, but he found himself unable to. "Fucking dibs," was all he could whisper.